The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 years, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Josh Shigala from thestandard.io.
Hi there, folks.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to Issue 1. Issue 1 Bitcoin Flounders ahead of Friday jobs report that might push the Fed to slash rates by 50 basis points. The U.S. Central Bank has indicated it will begin cutting the Fed funds rate at its mid-September meeting, but the size and speed of the easing cycle is up for debate. Josh Shigala, the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies are down. Are they going down further? What do you think about the Fed jobs report and the rates?
Yeah, I don't know how much it has to play with the Bitcoin price. I think everyone looks for a reason, but it's generally its own thing in one way. Of course, it is tied to the general stock market now because of the ETFs. So there is a dog wagging the tail sort of scenario, and the tail wagging the dog also. So it's it's just the ratio between how much is wagging each. And at this stage, it does, you can see a correlation, obviously, but I think that a vast majority of that could also be psychological in terms of the traders. And but because the whole point of Bitcoin was, if there, as a hedge to the mainstream system of fiat. And so if that system goes down, of course you'll see a collapse, just like you'll see a collapse in gold and everything else, in the moment, in that very moment. But then after that moment has passed, you'll see a rise in gold, while the fiat collapses further, or a rise in Bitcoin. And so it's always interesting trying to correlate these things. But yeah, I mean, US job numbers, like 160,000 jobs in August, it doesn't really mean much. And I mean, if I was on the Harris Biden administration right now, I'd be doing everything possible to stimulate the economy before the election, because it only plays to the hand of the other side if it falls even further. So people are screaming out for a rate cut. Obviously, people want cheaper money, but they are the borrowers. They are the business. They are the people that wanting to buy mortgages, or borrow mortgages, and and the rest are the savers, the ones that have savings. They don't, or the retirees. They generally suffer from a rate cut, because that increases inflation. It increases the amount of money in circulation as money becomes cheaper again.
It seemed like Bitcoin since the halving was the surest sure thing. All you had to do was buy Bitcoin, wait for the supply crunch, and then the price would go up. And even though we're looking at charts right now, this is not financial advice. When something's the surest sure thing and everyone believes it's going to the moon, of course it goes down. I think this is one of those fake outs. When we look at it in the future, we're going to look back and we're going to say, yeah, remember we thought it was going down and then it turned completely around. I have no evidence to believe this, but that's what I think it's going to do. I think the people who are selling now are mainly selling their coins to these rich ETF buyers and these other institutions who are coming in and can buy on a longer timeline. Of course, you've got to sell if you need to pay rent, credit card bills, food, restore your bathroom. But other than that, you got to hodl as much as you can, because I think it's going to go back up. I have no evidence to base this on. It just seems like it always goes up in the past. But it is certainly scary news from the Fed, and the kind of thing that gets people ready to sell and to freak out. Josh, now you're going to, for the exit question, you're going to predict against the magic 8 ball, the source of all truth in Bitcoin. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week?
Oops. Well, I don't know
Unmute, go
about
ahead.
next week, but my thesis is in the next 2 months leading into Christmas, um, we will start to see that turnaround happen. I just don't know how long. It's hard to tell. So I'm going to go sideways for that annoying fence sitter.
A happy Christmas for Bitcoin. Let's see. Starship Schrodinger in the chat says next week higher, but going below 52. That would be quite a
Uh-huh.
thing. I'm going to
Hmm.
stick with being a perma bull. I just think it's always a good thing. I'm always confused when it goes down. I never understand why people sell, but that's always been the case. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? And it says on the line, my sources say no. My sources say no. Negativity
Mm.
from the Magic 8 Ball. Moving on, issue 2. FTC issues warning about Bitcoin ATM scams. Here's how to protect yourself from Time Magazine. Of course, we've warned you about Bitcoin ATM scams here on the show many times, discussing them in detail, how the person gets you on the phone, claims that your husband or significant other is missing, and the only way to get them back is by sending Bitcoin through this strange machine that you've never used before. The FTC said that 66 million in fraudulent losses in the first half of 2024, up from 12 million in the entire year of 2020. So the scams are going up in Bitcoin. We've also heard stories from The Atlantic magazine, we are big time now, about Telegram groups where users trade back and forth exciting information about what to buy. None of them saying just buy and hold Bitcoin. What do you think about these scams for Bitcoin finally going mainstream? Thomas Hunt. Well, we've talked about these before. My friend who had a convenience store in London actually had to unplug his machine to keep people from sending their money to the scammers. They were so convinced by the person on the phone. They're like, your so and so has tax problems. We've captured them. We're not going to let them go unless you send $1,000 through this strange machine. And I think that's what everyone's going to do. So I'm not surprised to see this go wide. I am sad for the people that got scammed, but there's nothing we can do to protect them. This is happening because there's a better way to send money across the internet, and that better way is Bitcoin. Once you've sent your Bitcoin, you can't cancel it and get it back. There's no central authority like American Express that you can call up and say, hey, sending my Bitcoin back. I made a mistake. And that's why it's a new avenue for scammers to take advantage of low information consumers who believe this information when they're fed it on the phone. And a lot of times it's older people. The person will do that classic scam. They made a mistake. They sent too much money to your account, and now the older person has to send it back to you. But instead of having to pack it in a box and take it down to the shop, they just have to get the money out of one ATM, feed it into another ATM, send it across the internet, and we have a whole new avenue for scammers. Josh, what do you think about this? And also the Telegram group, which isn't quite a scam, but all this investment advice, it just never ends.
Yeah, it's phenomenal that that people fall for it, and it's really sad that people will will fall for a scam and be told to stay on the phone while you go down to the Bitcoin ATM, and that people will go, oh, okay. And uh, I guess this is part of being part of the technocratic class. um, we can generally see through this stuff, and it's like the elderly that suffer from these scams the most because the elderly don't really understand it. They get bamboozled. They get bamboozled with techno babble and everything else. And it makes sense. There's an ATM. It's Bitcoin. It's real. I mean, the thing is about this Time magazine piece is that, and I haven't read the whole lot. I just read part of it, so I'm not sure if it talks about, because the vast majority of these scams also um, run through these gift cards. And so these scammers generally, what they do is they say, you've got a massive tax bill. It's fine. The IRS will take Bitcoin. They'll also take wire transfer. They'll take uh, Amazon debit card, like Amazon cards. and people believe this, and that's the saddest
It's so
thing.
fantastic that the IRS is liberaling up and taking Amazon debit cards. I think it's great.
It's wild, right? And then taking it with someone with a like barely understandable English with an Indian accent
Well,
or
another
a,
part of it is it's kind of exciting, and it's like the 24 TV show. You're being handled, right? You have a handler on the phone, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing now? Where are you going? Don't hang up! Don't hang up!" You know, they'll
yeah, yeah.
kill
Don't talk to
your
them.
friend. You know, they'll
Don't,
kill
yeah,
that
yeah,
poor woman. You know, and all
yeah,
that. But yeah, it is
yeah,
really tragic for these people because you can see a lot of videos of the guys messing with the scammers, and they'll try to
yeah,
keep them on the line, and you see how great these people are at talking. They're like, "Oh, Mrs. Johnson, you're like a grandmother to me. You're the sweetest woman. Please don't let me lose my job. I've got 3 children and a wife. I'll lose my job." You
yeah,
know, and they get
yeah.
the person emotionally into it, and they send the money.
Yeah, there's a great guy online called Kit Bogart, or something like that. Maybe the chat knows. Um, but hilarious, absolutely hilarious listening to some of this. But in one way, once you do listen to it, it is also kind of very, very sad. A, because you realize how many of these people, some of these YouTubers, they actually hack the scam operation, and they put put webcam, like they get onto their webcams, or they get the database of victims and targets and stuff. And it's just unfortunate when you see how many people fall for this. But on the other side, it's absolutely hilarious to see them just dragging these scammers through the mud. And then on the third side of this coin, it's kind of sad that some of these scammers are just almost slaves that are being held by these mafias and told to go through these scripts and basically do it. Otherwise, you know, I don't know what the consequences are, but I'm pretty sure it's bad. So yeah, it's sad all around, terrible, but
Well, and
slightly funny.
that's the part that I find shocking, Josh, that you can't really focus on until you know more about this, is that people are working this like a job. They're showing up every day to the office and they're going through scripts about how to scam
Oh,
the stupid Americans,
shocking,
and they're
shocking.
improving the scripts, and they're, you know, A/B testing this script and that script, and it's just a job. And like you were there with Josh with your coffee mug, same thing. They're at the office, you know, another day at the office scamming the
Yeah,
Americans or whatever. And you know, you feel for them
yeah,
because they don't
yeah,
have a lot of other options. They don't have other choices. And in a way, the, you know, older people are, you know, they're available for this scam. They fit into there. They have low technology. They have comparatively a lot of funds compared to these people. But once again, they don't just take 10% of the old person's funds and tell them to fix up their security. They take it all. They always take it all. So it is always
yeah.
sad.
There's actually it becomes sad when it becomes part of the culture. I remember hearing that in Nigeria, one of the top hit songs in the top 10, I think it became like top three or something, or even number one, was a song about how you scam the dumb Westerner. And that, you know, and the whole song is about how these scams work. And if you know, if you're too dumb to fall for it, then you deserve to lose your money and all this stuff. And it's just so unfortunate, it's so terrible. But yeah, anyway, um,
Well, it's always
it's nothing to do
easy.
with Bitcoin. It's nothing to do with Bitcoin. That's the fact.
It's always easy to do these scams until you're like, oh, what if that was my grandmother? What if that was my sister? You know, what if that was someone in my family that we're robbing
Yeah.
the money from? And it might seem, you know, juvenile, like, oh, they're just ripping off some old lady down the street. But this is on an industrial scale, people in offices. And once they're done ripping off one person, they just hang up, call up, and rip off someone else. So it just keeps going.
Well, and it's going to get worse. Like with these large language models of being able to talk so well, and also this fake, you know, accents, and being able to just, so it starts to scale out very, very quickly, and you know, to a true industrial scale. Um, it's very, very scary. And in fact, it's already so bad. Like you said, Thomas, most people actually have had somebody. If I talk to anybody and say talk about scams, some pretty much everyone will say, "Oh yeah, I know someone who's been scammed, or I've been scammed, or my mum's been scammed." it happens so often that it's almost it's so tragic. It's so tragic how often it happens. And this is what really annoys me mostly about institutions like the SEC and such, is that they sit there fining all these big companies, but when it comes to the amount of money that they take in from the government to basically stop people losing their money, um, there's so many people losing their money from scams, such an extraordinary amount of scams, that it's so and it would be so good to see actual education or that money being put to other uses rather than these ridiculous enforcement nonsense that are ill-informed and such. But yeah, Bitcoin ATMs are the front, so they get the finger pointing from institutions like Time Magazine, but it really doesn't have anything to do with Bitcoin. If Bitcoin didn't exist at all, or any crypto, they would be doing it in another way. They would be using, well, they're using it with gift cards and such.
It just seems at its core that we built the internet improperly. They built it in an open fashion so that, for example, anyone can email anyone else on the system, which sounded like a great idea, but I don't think that they had that little devil sitting on their shoulder saying, someone will use this system to send 1 million messages. They'll send 10 million messages. They'll message everyone in the world. Like, they don't care. There's no etiquette for these people. They don't think that they'll be kicked off the net. They don't think there'll be damages. And if 1 out of 1 million signs up for your product and sends you money, it's a win. And you just keep sending these messages, as opposed to a system that had kind of a whitelist, sorry, wrong word, allow list, where it would go through and it'd say, oh, this person's allowed, or this person's a friend of a friend, or a friend of a friend of a friend. You could go pretty far down the chain before you would get this open system where you just allow anyone anywhere to email you. And usually the prize inside is a scam, or they're going to try to steal your accounts. And I've seen it
Yeah.
now with a lot of text messages as well, where they send you kind of open-ended things like, hey, did you see this thing last Friday? Or want to get dinner
Mm.
next week? Or haven't seen you in a while? And you're always like, at first you're like, oh, you get so few messages. You're like, oh, it's an old
Who
friend.
is
This is
this?
great.
Yeah.
Who's this? And it's always a scam. It's always not a real
Yeah.
person. Report and block. And once
Yeah.
again, it's because it's allowing first. It's not
Mm.
having a controlled list.
Yeah. And this is where technology like Hashcash from Adam Back, these sorts of things that never actually fruitioned, should be thought about again. I mean, there's no reason why we cannot have Hashcash now. Like, and Hashcash, for those that don't know, was a way to was mentioned in the Bitcoin white paper, and was a way to basically create a stamp for email. So you do some work, and then that work creates a stamp, and that stamp then has to go onto the email, and you need that stamp on the email to send it, and you can set on the receiver end how much value you need to get through. And so if you say, someone like I don't know, Elon Musk might have that at $10 or at $20 or something, just to make sure. But I don't think Hashcash actually had any value to it. It was just an amount of computation. So and that stopped the spammers, because the spammers couldn't do it for free. They had to do some computation. And yeah, this is interesting, and I don't know why it hasn't been done again. In fact, I did see somebody try it once with Bitcoin, where you could attach some sats. This was back in the day before we had scaling issues, but you could attach some sats, and you could say, I will donate. If I read the email, it donates, or it sends back to the person that sent it to you. So yeah, I don't know. Someone should do that again.
I think Jesse Powell had a great email system where you had to pay it to get through to him. And like you say, Josh, it's just about how much they're willing to pay. The spammers are maybe willing to pay, $1 or $2. A real person maybe $10 to get that opportunity to reach somebody, and that would be a much better system. And you could keep the $10. Let's keep moving. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com, where we've got more than 3 months, 20 days, and 0 hours of video. You could watch it for 3 months and 20 days straight at worldcryptonetwork.com. Issue 3, Mount Gox wouldn't have happened with modern tools, Mark Karpeles says. The former Mount Gox CEO is back again with his new exchange and an Ungox venture. As it says, he now has an exchange. Where's the name of it? Here it is. It's called ElipX, which allegedly has the best modern practices of exchange learned from Mt. Gox. And he has a crypto rating agency called Ungox. He says, I can say very confidently that the Mt. Gox hack wouldn't have happened if we had had some of the tools we have today. Josh Shigala, what do you think about Mt. Gox? Karpeles is back, and the Ungoxed rating system.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I think, redeemed himself a lot because he worked very, very hard to get everybody something back. And that was extremely hard to do. It was extremely hard to do. I think the guy went through hell and back. He was young at the time when Mt. Gox launched. He didn't know what he was up against. He didn't understand the amount of technical overhead that he needed. He went in there with this very naive, but also overconfident vibe of I don't even know how to say it, but basically he was just overwhelmed and didn't understand. I don't think he set out to scam somebody. He just didn't have anything set up to see if his exchange started to slip into fractional reserve, and yeah, Starship said it right. He fucked up. He got robbed, and he didn't deliberately steal, but it was almost too hard for him to see through the spaghetti that was there. And so yeah, I think he's a good person to understand what is needed by exchanges, and it is needed an exchange rating agency for sure. I think it makes sense.
Well, I still don't believe that this is a transaction malleability thing, but I also don't blame Mark. I believe that he bought kind of a broken exchange from some kind of questionable people. Jed McCaleb, the serial entrepreneur who seems to start a new project, sell it, move on to the next project, and start a new project and sell it before you've even heard about the last project. I'm not certain that the Mt. Gox exchange was solvent when he bought it, and I'm not certain it was ever solvent. I don't know that it's because of a transaction malleability bug that allowed someone to withdraw endless coins, or if just the nature of the thing. It always seemed like a very shaky PHP application back when I was using it. I was very surprised that everyone was trusting all of their money into this, and I wasn't surprised when it crashed and disappeared. We're certainly sad that everyone lost their money, but maybe they got some of it back recently. Things are turning around. Josh, what about the for the exit question? What about the second part that he started an Ungox venture where he's going to rate crypto projects? I like the idea on its face. I'm just not sure, sadly, that Mark Karpeles is the person to do it. This is like Charlie Shrem. Maybe they could team up together and go around and rate projects. I'm not sure that having the most arrested, the most bankrupted people in our industry going around and rating things is really going to work out for us. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean it's tricky also. It's such a different industry nowadays. It's so wide, and like how do you rate? You have to have a, I mean, it's possible. At the end of the day, if you're the CEO, you don't have to sit there rating as long as you build the structure to rate things. But let's say there's a difference between an free and open source protocol like the standard would be rated, would need different eyeballs and hats to understand all of the game theory and everything else involved in that, compared to something like an exchange like Binance or Kraken, or and then that would be also different, slightly different than very small exchanges or niche exchanges. So specifically on let's say Voltoro, which dealt with physical gold. There needs to be an understanding of how gold is then kept, not only physically, but what the bailment contracts look like in that people are signing up to. and then you need lawyers to look through that. So there's a whole lot of work there, and then there's a whole lot of, I don't know, like how do you, but like how does that make money? How does that make money? Do they get a stamp? Is it kind of like a trust stamp, that these
Well,
entity
everyone knows
trust
how
companies?
ratings agencies make money. They get corrupt. We have one here in Las
Exactly.
Vegas. I don't know anything about it in detail, but it's called the Best of Las Vegas Awards. And it seems if your restaurant does dot, 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 and dot, 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 you can pretty much assure that you'll get one of those every year. You can put it on the door, you can have it in all your ads and your magazines. And sadly, this is the end of these ratings associations because, like you say, Josh, they're just not very profitable. There's no, if you're
Yeah.
doing it honestly and truly, then you're giving out a lot of bad reviews, a lot of angry rankings, and no one's
Yep.
going to donate to your cause after that.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was heading. Exactly that. I mean, you see it over and over again. Look at the food ratings, like any rating agency that rates health on a food packet generally just gets destroyed within a few years, and then they're like stamping, I don't know, like some chemical ridded cereal box with very healthy
It's
approval.
it's all about
It's
finding
just
where that line is, like Gremlins in the PG-13 rating. You're like, how much can we put in? How much sugar? How much violence? We'll put one more scene, one more, gram of sugar, and we take it out and we find that line.
yeah, B2C Moon Guy, maybe he'll put the rating on the blockchain. I love it.
That'll work like IBM and those diamonds. But this isn't the first time that we've heard about Mount Gox returning. Brock Pierce famously wanted to return Mount Gox, calling it a phoenix returning from the ashes. I believe he felt that the Mount Gox brand was so valuable that it had to be reused. I, on the other hand, just for my cheap seats out here, I felt the Mount Gox brand had no value. Although I suppose it's like Coke and Pepsi, it has name recognition. It's a famous broken Bitcoin exchange. It seemed like he's gone with Ellip X or something, which I've already forgotten twice. Josh, what do you think about the value of the Mt. Gox brand? Should they have used the Mt. Gox name?
Um, you know, someone, it's interesting. Branding's very, very fascinating because you can use negative news in your favor as well. And Trump does it very well. Um, you can it doesn't matter what news is out there as long as your brand is being put out there. Um, that you then feel happy about that because you're getting branding and that sticks in your name. Like no matter how bad Mount Gox is, I'll always remember. I mean, I was personally involved there because I lost funds, but I think most people would recognize that name, Mount Gox. So I don't know, like if I don't know. I think it is a good idea to use. Yeah.
Well, and that's just what people say about the World Crypto Network. But we're not selling. Let's move on to issue four. Issue four, inside the Trump crypto project, linked to a $2 million DeFi hack and a former pickup artist. Politics or not, it's not looking good for the Trump crypto project. Four team members listed in the World Liberty Financial White Paper previously worked on Doe Finance, and they're apparently using the same code that allowed $2 million dollars to be drained in July. One also founded Date Hotter Girls LLC. So it's just not looking good. Let's go to Thomas Hunt on this. Well, the first thing I say is in addition to that, from my notes here, there was also a Twitter hack. Let's see, getting phone calls, everything. There was a Twitter hack as well where some of the Trump family members were hacked and then their accounts pointed to a different World Liberty financial scam. So that was pretty fun as well to see the other family members say, no, don't go to that page. That's a different scam. That's not our scam. But there's nothing special about this. People have come to crypto before, acted like Bitcoiners, even been paid by Bitcoiners, had fantastic speeches and events and everything you could believe in. And then the way to fix Bitcoin is their own crypto project, dot, dot, dot. It does seem like this is an incredibly large crypto project, an entire DeFi platform. I've seen some articles saying that the new coin has gigantic rewards, even a 75% pre-mine, which is impressive even by crypto standards. And there's even concerns if Donald Trump wins the presidency again, how can he be running or owning or connected to this weird DeFi project thing, which they say supports the dollar, but really seems like it supports them getting fees and kickbacks and returns. Josh Shigala, what do you think about the latest attempt to fix crypto from the Trump family, the World Liberty Financial?
Um, yeah, it's hard to know because obviously if there's people that have a scammy background in the first place, it lowers that value. I'm not sure how much Trump has to do with that. How much, like what sort of share he has in this. I do know that he has started to talk about Bitcoin and crypto in general. He was uh, at the finance. I've forgotten what it was called. Finance Summit just yesterday or the day before. Gave it quite an interesting speech about how he's going to.
It does seem like, according to the website, that all three of his Trumps, including, quote, 18-year-old Barron, who is, quote, identified as the project's DeFi visionary, are involved in the project, at least according to their website.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I really don't know too much about it to even comment, but I would say that it would be important to, the thing is, it's different because normal politicians don't really have businesses because they're just all they do is suck off the teat of the state. Whereas when you get somebody that's an outsider that is a businessman, he's gonna be tied up in ventures. So it's not usual, that's for sure. So yeah.
Well, I'd say our normal stance is to try to warn people and to say something like you should just hold on to Bitcoin or Ethereum or
Yeah.
something else in the top 10, something that you
Yep.
believe in, rather than
Yep.
investing in this new weird thing, even though you like this guy or you like his politics or whatever it may be. But this isn't designed for our audience. This isn't designed for you. We can warn you all you want. This thing's still probably going to sell out really well, just like the Trump NFTs, because he's selling to his own audience. His own audience is there. They can figure out credit cards. They can sign up for this thing. They can send their money over. And God knows what happens after that. But you're on your own. But again, you're probably not watching this show. If anything, you're negative about me and so forth. But yes, I would warn people. I don't think this is a good investment. Not investment advice. I have no insider info. It just
Mm.
looks bad. And we've been through this before. Many other people come to crypto, think it's great. Then they say what kind of business they can build onto it. But let's
Yeah,
move
and I
on.
don't know
Go ahead,
what
Josh.
they're trying to do with that liberty. I don't know. Like people put a brand of DeFi.
Make tons
I
of
don't know what
money
that
and
means.
awesome fees. I mean, it's just about sweet money and fees. And if I could be an exchange, then I would get $10 every time you trade. And if I can get you to trade 100 times a day, I'm making sweet money. And I don't think it's any more complicated than they just want money.
Hmm. I like money.
Well, let's keep moving. Sadly, we have a sadder issue for our last issue. Cosmopolitan magazine published a very large, very long piece about Tony Lane, the famous cryptocurrency pioneer who unfortunately passed away. According to the piece in Cosmopolitan, Tony Lane passed away from anorexia, which I didn't know much about this, but apparently constantly denying yourself nutrition does have a long-term negative effect, and many people who have anorexia do eventually pass away or have serious consequences from not eating. Tony Lane made a lot of speeches, traveled around. Wasn't a big fan of me. We weren't great friends. Josh Shigala, you knew Tony Lane. What'd you think of this article? And we also the sad news that we can confirm, at least according to Cosmopolitan magazine, she passed away from anorexia.
Yeah, it's very sad. She was a friend of mine, and we spent some time in Berlin. We spent some time uh, flying to some different parties and such. And she was quite such an interesting character. A lot of people didn't like didn't like her attitude. she's one of these sort of polarizing. She was one of these polarizing characters, but I think her heart was in the right place, and um, yeah, it was really a shock. When I went to a funeral because COVID just started early 2020, and so everyone was in lockdown, and so her funeral was over Zoom, and it was quite touching actually. All of the people that came out of the woodwork, uh, and gave a little talk about Toni, and it's yeah, it's very unfortunate, and I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to ask the parents what she died of. I knew it was something to do with starvation, but I thought maybe there was a cancer and she was trying to starve it out or something. I wasn't quite sure, and it was, it was hard with COVID and stuff, and yeah, I didn't want to. So I just knew that she had passed, and I went to the funeral and listened, but
That is
yeah,
one of the
shocking.
things that the article mentioned is how kind of disappointing the funeral was because it happened during COVID. If this had happened in normal times, especially given a lot of the kind of well-off people that she hung out with, you have to assume it would have been a big event, a lot of people coming, a lot of people making speeches in person, just a lot more to it. It's sad she passed during the beginning of COVID there. However, it's a very difficult, complicated story. I think there's a lot more to unpack here. When I look at it, on one hand, supporting Tony's side, I think she was kind of used as a symbol of beauty. A lot of people had her speak at their conferences, they had her meet the important people, they used her to get connections to get to the next level. And as the article said, no one ever funded her startup. I don't know that her startup would have been successful or that she had the gear to run a startup rather than just make speeches, but it seems like they should have funded her. It wouldn't have cost them hardly anything. They kind of treated her badly, and then when she needed their help, there didn't seem like there's anyone around. So it is a very tragic story,
I
even
mean,
as
it
someone
was
that, wasn't a fan of me and so forth. Go ahead, Josh.
yeah. For those that don't know, her startup was BitNation, which was very, very. It like if I was a VC, it would be hard to fund because it was all over the shop. She had an amazing way of speaking and would encapsulate the audience. But at the end of the day, when you thought about it after, so hang on, so BitNation is like some stateless thing based around blockchains, and you have IDs on there, you have um, I don't know, some sort of like, it just didn't make any sense to me personally. I liked her as a person. We had I have a lot of fond memories of Toni, but um yeah, as a startup, and I think she would have done, she was one of these bright stars. Like, she would have done something big in her life purely because when you heard her speak, it was like, who is this person? She had a quite an eloquent tongue.
Yeah, but I kind of agree with you. I'm not sure if it added up at the end of the day.
No.
I mean, I think she was very passionate about what she said, and she went around a lot and made a lot of speeches, and she had this idea for a startup. And I don't know that it is BitNation, but Josh, if you say it is, I've heard of that when Suzanne, I want to say Templehoff or something, was running it. Also, there's
Yeah.
some World Crypto Network relation there because Chris Ellis demoed the blockchain ID right here on the World Crypto Network. Then it kind of felt like BitNation took that idea and used it to raise some kind of funding. Then there was something else called Ubiquity that broke off from BitNation and also raised funding. And of course, poor Chris could never raise any funding for Blockchain ID or any of his projects. So it's always strange. I only met her a few times. One time she wasn't pleased with me. The other times, I don't know that she noticed I was there, but it was at Crypto Castle. And then I saw her once in Malta, and it was the funniest thing because she was, of course, getting her speaker's pass. And I was finding out that I had signed up for the wrong Malta convention and that I might not even be allowed in. So it's always different circumstances there. But what a character. Oh, they're saying Schrodinger says his low price alarm just went off. So we might be
That's a
having a
horrible alarm.
price event. It's around 52,950
Oh,
right
wow.
now. So it is in a bit of a little turn there. But Josh,
Yeah.
anything else that you want to say about Tony Lane, or or maybe just a good time to think about some other people in Bitcoin we haven't heard from in a while, or someone that you remember from back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to have a sort of look back through all the people. You know how the Oscars go and talk about, maybe we could do a show and look back at some of the personalities in Bitcoin that have passed, uh, like John McAfee, Tony Lane, and there's a few others that that
Well, and
famous that
some
guy
of
that
them,
died
some of them, it's so
surfing. And
sad we don't even know if they've passed. I did this tweet and asked all my friends recently about Jason King, and didn't really come to a conclusion.
oh wow,
Either Jason
yeah.
has he's run off. Some people think that he had some problems with people. There may have been scams there, so people are very upset with him. They say he's not worth looking for. And then in general, he told me that he was unwell at one point, but I never
Mm.
heard a follow up to that. And it's not the kind of thing you can just, hey, check in like 6 months later, like, hey, did you beat that, life threatening illness, or did it eat you?
Mm.
And strangest thing, because there's not a lot of talk on his Facebook page. Usually there's kind of a remembrance thing. But yeah, I remember Jason King, Sean's Outpost, running
Sean's
across
Outpost.
America, raising money for the
Yeah.
homeless. Early friend of Vitalik. Vitalik was there in our video with Jason
Yeah.
and Vitalik where he ran across America. And there's an interesting, fun story Jason told me once where he said he was talking to Vitalik and he said jokingly to Vitalik, he said, "Why don't we just make a blockchain full of blockchains, and it'll be full of blockchains, and we'll use the blockchains." And they're laughing and they're having a good time. And Vitalik was like, that's
Hmm.
not too far from Ethereum. That's not too
Yeah.
far from what we're doing over here. And you're mocking us and you're laughing, but no, it's not too far. So yeah, Jason
Yeah.
King was a good guy. There's a lot of other people you just don't see around anymore. We used to have Andreas Antonopoulos on these shows. I enjoyed having him on. I'm not sure how to reach him anymore. It was
I'm not.
it was pretty.
He cut everything. Like it's almost impossible to get in touch with him.
It was
But yeah,
discouraging to
I've
me
tried.
when he unfollowed everyone on Twitter. I felt that we had a little way maybe to send him a message that he might see through Twitter, email, other
Mm.
ways. I'm sure he's jammed. But it is kind of sad, and it's not just him, it's not just others, but it does seem like nobody calls you anymore. In the old days, you
Yeah.
used to be, you'd call up your old friends, you'd say, "Hey, how you doing, old buddy? It's been a while." And then we had the
Yeah.
COVID thing, and it was kind of like, well, if you're not going to call people during the COVID thing, and I think a lot of people didn't, and they just got discouraged and they got, shut in at home. And now they're just
Yeah.
like, well, it's another 2 years for all my acquaintances. I know that feeling where I'm like, yeah, I was going to see that guy every year at a conference, and then whoop, they disappear. But yes,
Well,
there's nobody calls anymore.
yeah. I mean, like Jason King, there's a name I haven't heard in such a long time. And Jason King, you bringing it up brings back a flood of memories. I mean, this guy basically gave Bitcoin to homeless people when it was like $30, somewhere between 30 and $100. And it was all about the community would donate Bitcoin and he would give it out to homeless people. And and back then you couldn't really trade it in. I mean, you had like Charlie Shrem start his thing where you could buy Bitcoin. I don't know if you could sell it through him, but
I
to sell
remember
it,
in
I'm
one of the articles, the homeless had traded their Bitcoin for a gift card for pizza, probably through GYFT, and even back then they were upset. They're like, "Yeah, it was worth 135 last week. It's worth 300 now. I wish I hadn't bought the pizza."
yeah, yeah, yeah. So and I'm wondering, like, I would love to hear if there's anybody out there that got received money while they were homeless and now richer than most people in America because of Jason King. I'd love to know if there's anybody out there that managed to do that because sometimes people are homeless not because they're totally mentally ill, but they had some bad luck in that moment. So it would
Yeah,
be
and
interesting if
well,
there's any
sadly, again, when I
residual.
asked Twitter, all the stories were very negative, and that Jason had scammed them out of lots of money, even double-digit Bitcoin. So you never know what
Oh
people are
wow,
actually doing, what they're actually up to. But you
yeah,
hope for the best, and yeah, it is sad, Josh. We've lost all these people, as they're saying in the chat. Yeah, their scene. Starship says his scene fell apart in the pandemic. I remember I used to go to the San Francisco Bitcoin meetup, and there's dozens of people that you recognize and maybe you know their first name and you see them every week at this meetup, that just disappeared. That just the COVID thing. I moved. They probably moved. We completely disappeared. So it is strange to lose all these people. So try to check in with your friends, try to see what's going on. But I think we better head to the end of the show. Josh, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
The prediction basically is that the sun will rise tomorrow, and you know, to keep your head up high when Bitcoin goes down. It's just a phase, and like anything else, it will go back up. Don't worry too much about it. It is like Starship said. That alarm is meant for him to go long. So very good outlook. That's a true trader there. Buy when there's blood in the streets, and sell when everyone's juvenile. Juvenile, jovial. I meant it's very early here.
Let's see. Schrodinger says prediction: the bathroom will not be finished by next week. Well, we're rooting for you. We'll see how it goes. I
Yeah,
just want to give a shout out, I guess, to Cosmopolitan magazine and to the author. Let's see. Do I have her name? Jessica Klein, who wrote this nice piece about Tony Lane Casserly. A lot of these things just get forgotten, kind of pushed under the rug, especially like
yeah.
Josh said during COVID. No one really knew what happened to her. There was a lot of conspiracy theories and uncertainty about maybe she'd faked her death, or maybe somebody was involved, or drugs, or other kind of drama. So, as sad as it is to see it simplified to anorexia and a
Mm,
lifelong struggle with this serious disease,
mm,
it is nice to have the closure and to have the finality, and also a little bit of a celebration of her career and what she tried to do. I do think there are other angles to this. Uh, in the crypto world that I live in, many people famously know Tony Lane as the founder of Cointelegraph and
oh
the
yeah, that's
face
true.
of Cointelegraph for a long time. Then there's a whole really weird story where the people who worked at Cointelegraph were told that she was not the founder and she was not powerful and they shouldn't listen to her. And then they also kind of used her as a figurehead so they could say they were a woman run company. And then they disappeared her and they disappeared their website. No one, we still don't know who owns Cointelegraph. And that's pretty important if you're giving out information that people make stock and money based decisions on. But that's one of those mysteries that we'll just never know. And Tony
Yeah.
Lane's involvement in it is also a mystery and a very strange thing that was completely excluded from this article. So
Well,
there's
the
always
interesting
more.
thing with the Cointelegraph as well is that all of a sudden it was Maria Jones who was then the founder, when it was always Tony Lane, and it was almost like 1984. No, no, now it's not. It was never Tony Lane. It was Maria Jones, but it was still two women that were quite beautiful, and you know, it's straight. Yeah, Cointelegraph is a strange story, and something that I think would be interesting. It would be definitely an interesting read if someone dug into that story and created a post for it.
Well, let's put it out there then. Jessica Klein, you've got more work to do. Look at Cointelegraph and, of course, look at Tony Lane Casserly's job there and what she did. But thanks again to everybody for joining us. Thanks for giving us a thumbs up down below and subscribing if you haven't already. Until next time, bye
Bye
bye.
bye.